Okay, I think maybe this is working. I'm recording it. I'm streaming it. Not really sure why, but Owncast was having a lot of issues for me. Might have to look at that later, but I got some more testing to do. So, okay, so I have set up here a couple things with my OBS and my Stream Deck, and I need to kind of test all of them out just to see how that all shakes out for me. So, what I've got going on is my MiSTer set up on my desk, and that is plugged into a capture device. And I also have a document camera overhead that will let me kind of show both what the MiSTer is outputting and what the buttons and stuff is going on the MiSTer itself. So if I switch here really quick, this is just my phone. And so I've got the actual device here, and I've got a keyboard and mouse hooked up to it, as well as a controller for the various things it can do. The device itself here is really interesting. So there's 3 boards here, and then these wooden panels that I've screwed on either side that I bought from Etsy. But the middle board here is the actual FPGA. So the MiSTer is a board that it contains like a kind of low-end, a somewhat low-end processor from a company called Thoracic, I believe. There's somehow Intel is involved. I'm not quite sure how the whole setup works, but anyway, FPGA, I don't know all of the things about it, but basically it's a device that can be sort of, its logic and circuitry can be reprogrammed to sort of act like other processors and chips. So it's kind of a type of emulation, although it works very differently. Basically, you tell the chip, hey, be like these chips, and it sort of does its thing. So people develop that software. They're called cores, and then the MiSTer can do all kinds of things. It can emulate game consoles. It can do crazy amounts of like arcade boards and vintage computing. It's very, very cool stuff. And I'm just starting to scratch the surface of it. So the MiSTer itself is interesting. So the MiSTer itself, like I said, is these middle board here, and that has the FPGA and the actual CPU that runs everything. And then there is below that, this one's pretty boring. This is just a board that has a bunch of USB ports on it. It's just a USB hub that was designed for use with the MiSTer that fits in a nice package. And this top one is called the IO board. That one's super interesting. We're not actually using that for much today, but it does a couple things. The first one is it gives you some buttons, so I can press buttons on here to reset the MiSTer and stuff like that. Not totally essential, but it is kind of handy. It also has some status lights that look neat. But the big thing it can do, and I think I'm going to switch to the overhead here. The big interesting thing it can do is it also lets you do analog video out. And I'm not using that today, but it lets you hook it up to CRT computer monitor or old television via various adapters, and it's how I use it most often to play console games. But I'm capturing it right now with at my desk, so I'm using just the HDMI port out. Yeah, so I'm gonna kind of boot it up and walk through a couple things it can do really quick here. And I've been show some of the things I've been messing around with it. Okay, so I switch this over here. Okay, so got kind of a picture-in-picture thing here. Basically, the power for this is just this little cable with a switch that's in line here. So if I switch this on, that'll fire the MiSTer up. Theoretically. There we go. Okay, so cool thing is it boots up extremely quickly. I really like that about it. And you can kind of see what the output is here, and then I've got this overhead camera kind of showing the device itself. Yeah, so it does a lot of different things. People have developed cores for all kinds of 8 and 16-bit era consoles. So like Super Nintendo, original NES, Sega Master System, Mega Drive, Genesis, Game Boy Advance, all kinds of things, and tons of consoles that are super unfamiliar to me, like the Fairchild Channel F is in here. I don't have any games for that, but I can boot that up here. And apparently this is what the console would do if you boot it up with no game in it. It is kind of cool from a... apparently the Channel F had a built-in Pong game. It is kind of cool because you can... By the way these cores are developed, you can kind of see some things about the console and how they worked even without games plugged in. So like, for instance, you turn on a Game Boy Advance with no cartridge in it, it does this. That's it. Here I've got, so I've been playing A Link to the Past on the Super Nintendo recently, so I can fire that cartridge up. Yeah, and this very much just works like emulation does, really. I'm going to turn the volume on the MiSTer down here a little bit. So yeah, it's pretty cool. The emulation for most cores is extremely accurate, and on top of that, oh hey Jim. On top of that, one of the advantages of this type of emulation is it can do emulate a lot of the chips that were on the original machines in parallel, like they would run on the actual board. So things like input latency are very accurate to the original console, which is not usually the case for software emulation. So I'm not super good at these games or anything, but it does make them feel more authentic, especially when you're playing them on a CRT. So that's one thing. The other world of things that you can do with the MiSTer, and I think I'm just gonna reset it here really quick. I can use this button on the top of it. But the other thing you can do with the MiSTer is you can also use it to play arcade games that have been basically reverse engineered. So it's not everything, but it's quite a few. Some that I'm familiar with, some that I'm very much not. But like here's apparently revision 14 of Gauntlet. So I can put some coins in and start. Oops. Now, you're obviously not dealing with the original controls or anything, but so it's mapped to the gamepad I'm using. But it is a really cool way to experience some of these things. What was I playing the other day? Oh yeah, I was just seeing the difference between the asteroids, like original asteroids, and the difference between that and deluxe. And so some of the cool things about this from like a preservation standpoint is switching between the two and seeing what the authors of these cores have. So you can see that for the Asteroids Deluxe core, they actually have like the background image that was in there. In fact, when you go into the settings of the core, you can turn that on or off if you choose to, which I find super interesting. Can we multiplayer Gauntlet online? As far as I know, MiSTer doesn't have any online functionality like that for multiplayer, but that would be something I would love to see. One thing that is kind of interesting is some people have made a core for the Game Boy that lets you emulate two Game Boys hooked up to each other, and so it'll show both copies on screen at the same time with two controllers, which I find very interesting, but I haven't messed around with that. Yeah, so I'm trying to think here. We do Arkanoid. One of the things I really like about this device is even just the simplicity of how the basic menu software works. It's very basic, but I like it. It makes it pretty easy to use. And fast to use, certainly too. Now, Arkanoid's gonna be a little hard here. I'm playing and looking at the OBS preview of my MiSTer here on my computer screen because I don't have an HDMI splitter at this time. So there's some input latency that's a little bit annoying to get through. I've got a splitter coming on from Amazon, but I don't have it right now. So there's a good bit of latency here, but you get the idea. So what I've been playing with today is the computer cores, and I find these super interesting. And again, there's a ton of stuff here that I just haven't dug into. Some of it I want to, like the Amiga. That's just like a whole range of computers that I really don't know much about, but I find really interesting. I really would like to dig more into the Macintosh Plus core, and you can run macOS on there, which I think is really cool. But I haven't dug into that as of yet. What I have been digging into, though, is there is a 486 core. So this will emulate a 486 DOS or Windows machine. This is super cool. There's a lot you can do with this. There's a lot that I think this core needs yet that is lacking. Right now, it doesn't have very good, I would say, like the mouse support is kind of wonky. And the scaling, basically, like you're taking the image that was like 640 by 480 or 800 by 600 pixels, scaling it up for a modern display. It looks kind of weird. I don't know how it's going to look over stream, to be honest. But yeah. Commodore 64. Actually, I was messing with this after seeing you mess with the Commodore 128 a little bit. And I don't really know what to do with this thing, to be honest with you. But I am able to get in here and have it print stuff to the screen. I don't have any software for it right now. But I was able to, bam. I even got a loop happening. Whoop. One thing that messes me up on this is there are no lowercase characters. So I keep hitting shift and typing characters I don't expect. Hey, look at that. So that's pretty neat. Tutorial on file management program. Yeah, I would be really interested in that. One thing that's kind of interesting is like because of what this thing is, there's no floppy drive. You can actually emulate a floppy drive if you have the right hardware. I don't have that. So you can mount images in certain formats as virtual floppies. And it very much requires you to kind of do some research on what that particular core expects. So that's something I want to look into, but I haven't yet. All right. So, okay. So the 486 core, this is really cool. So the first thing you have to do is you actually have to mount virtual hard drives. So I went and found there are people on archive.org that have set up virtual hard drives for this specifically. So over here, I've got Windows 95 and I have an extra 1 gig hard drive that I've installed some software on myself. And then for some reason, you have to fill up every IDE port on this machine. So I have some blank drives. There we go. So then once I've done that, I can hit reset and it will actually attach the hard drives and boot up, and it's a trip. It's awesome. So here we're booting Windows 95 on a 486 machine. It looks like it crashed, so that's not great. Not sure what happened. Oh, okay. Maybe not. I don't know if the sound's gonna come through. Hopefully it does. Yeah. Okay. I hope that came on stream. I think I have it set up so it should. Okay. So this is pretty awesome. First of all, I have to have a second set of keyboard and mice here to operate this. But it works out okay. Let me see if I can. It's interesting because the MiSTer supports Bluetooth devices. I can actually use a Bluetooth keyboard and mouse with this, which is like, you know, obviously Bluetooth wasn't even a thing. Yeah, I don't have a lot installed here yet, but I'm working on it. So one of the really freaking cool things with this core is it has a virtual dial-up adapter already configured. So basically, I can go in here, hit connect, and it's going to do a fake dial-up connection, which actually gets me an IP address on my network, on my home Wi-Fi, my real Wi-Fi network. Now it runs at like 56K speed. It's very slow, but it does work. So you can actually get this Windows 95 install on the internet for better or worse. Now what the tricky thing is, I haven't been messing around with this enough to even really know how to get software on here in a good way. There are ways where you can take the virtual hard disk file and mount it. I think you need a Windows machine to do that. So I have one, I just haven't messed around with it. And so you could just throw files on the disk. You can you can burn virtual CDs and load them in. Again, I haven't messed with that. So what I've been doing is the way that seemed most obvious to me, which was I've just been taking files I want on this machine and throwing them on my actual website and downloading them from the web. But at 56K speed. So it's a very authentic experience, I think. It doesn't do the modem sound via that method anyway. But yeah, so I've got Internet Explorer, I think 5 or 4. I'm not really sure. I guess I could look. Is it gonna go? This is like, it's very authentic. This is what I remember this feeling like. Okay, 5.5. So it's probably the last version of IE that Windows 95 got, I would imagine. I don't think it shipped with anything like that. I think it would have been like 3 or something like that. But so I have the homepage set up here to go to my own domain. I have a very basic web page that I put together that will work in Internet Explorer to some extent, although the picture doesn't work. I'm not really sure why. I'm guessing, I don't know, maybe the picture has too many colors, like the bit depth is too high. I'm not really sure why. I'm not an expert at 90s web design, or any web design. But what I do have in here is I made a files directory that I will upload stuff to occasionally, and then I can download it into this Windows 95 install from here. So I've already used this to install WinZip because Windows 95 did not have zip support out of the box, and Netscape 3 Gold Edition. And I haven't installed it yet, but I've got Doom, Doom 2, and Duke 3D, Duke Nukem 3D from archive.org. So I'm gonna go ahead and oh shit. Okay, yeah, that'll work. Cool. I'm gonna go ahead and download Doom here. It's going at 20 kbps, so that's, you know, this is the real experience of of software at the time. So we'll let that download in the background because that's going to take a while. Although that will affect what I wanted to show next here. So I've got Internet Explorer here. The trick with this though is the modern web doesn't really work on Internet Explorer 5.5. If you have sites that require HTTPS, they're not going to work. Most modern web pages don't work very well. Some work better than you'd expect, like Google.com loads. They allow you to view it insecurely if you want to, and there's a version of it that they serve up to you that kind of works. Yeah, that the fact that this entire zip is 5.3 megabytes, like this is not the shareware version of Doom, by the way. This is, I think, all of the levels. I think this is the Ultimate Doom, which was like a later release. It's 5 megabytes. So yeah, the fact that this works at all is really cool, but most things won't really work. So if I try to go to my actual blog site, I'm pretty sure it's not really going to do much. Yeah. And that's because my blog site requires HTTPS right now. If you try to visit it via HTTP, it's going to redirect you. So I'm going to let that hang out and download, but I do have something really cool set up in Netscape. So in Netscape 3, I found this tool years back that a YouTube channel who likes to play with retro computing showcased called the Old Net. And it's a proxy for the Wayback Machine. So in Netscape, in my network preferences, I have a proxy set up that lets me directly get old web pages proxied in. So basically, you put in the oldnet.com, you set the port. The port number is the year that you're browsing. So in this case, we're getting pages from 1998. And then you have to tell it to not proxy archive.org. And so if I go in here and try to visit, say, well, here, netscape.com itself doesn't work right now, but this is what it looked like in 1998. If I try to go to like apple.com, I will get the 1998 version of it from the Wayback Machine. This is super cool. I've been playing around with this, and it is a ton of fun. It is very slow, but the fact that it works, man, is, I mean, it's slow, but also, again, my memory of dial-up in the 90s is pretty close. Anyway. So, yeah, this is something. It also is going to be a little extra slow just because we've got another download going too. I even love I forgot that Netscape had this, what's new, what's cool links on it, which I find fantastic. Yeah, mind-blowing from 1990s living room experience. We should chat about this. Yeah, I had, I really want to mess with this more. I think this would be super cool to have as sort of a setup that people could use. And there's another service I haven't messed with that does sort of the opposite of what this proxy does, where instead of proxying in archive.org, what it will do is it's called browser service. Basically, you run it on a Raspberry Pi, and it will let you browse the modern web. on an old machine. And it does it by, it's kind of ingenious. It actually takes the web page, it loads it up on a Raspberry Pi, and that sends over an image map. So it's just a big JPEG over to your machine, and then when you click on things, it will say, hey, they clicked in this coordinate, and then load the page. But I find interesting too, not so much an authentic experience, but just the fact that people figured that out is amazing. I tried to do something like this at Coventry. Yeah, it is very hard in my experience to get emulation of old OSs to work with networking. That is just not a thing. And the fact that the folks that made this core for 486 and built that in is this just so cool. Apparently this what's cool link doesn't work. What else should we visit here? I can go to see some Packers news. Hopefully the Packers had a website in 1998. I remember they did, I think. Yeah, look at this. Travis Jervy. I love, like, oh my god, like the fact that obviously this isn't all loaded in yet, but like we've got this McDonald's banner ad. Like, remember banner ads? um and this is just fantastic. Anyway, I've been having a ton of fun with this. There's something about web design of this era that is just so functional that I appreciate it so much. Like the fact that you can go to this site and right on the front is like newspaper style front page web design. And then you've got the upcoming schedule, and it's all right. It's information at your fingertips. Like, it's so cool. Like, I guarantee the Packers' actual homepage is not this functional right now. Let me just load this up really quick here. Hold on. So, I don't know what's up with my internet right now, but it is unhappy. Probably because I'm streaming over Wi-Fi. I probably need to get an Ethernet cable run from my laptop. But anyway, yeah. So we've got headlines and then videos and stuff. And okay, yeah, like I get it. But I don't know. I love that at that time the web design was in a place where we're like, yeah, let's see how we can make a newspaper on the web work. Did I buy the MiSTer board and build it, or did I buy it all together? I bought the MiSTer in a package, so it's not hard to build yourself. But I actually, at the time I bought it, it was very hard to actually get some of the components. So I bought it from a site called MiSTer Add-ons that will sell you the I/O board, the top board, the middle board, which is the actual MiSTer, and the USB hub. And then crucially, they also include a RAM chip that you need to use most cores, that adds RAM to the actual FPGA in a way that's accessible to it. So I bought that in a package, and then I added the little cover I have for it. Is my document camera working? It is not. What is going on with it? Let's see what's up with the document camera. Um, I don't know why that's not working. But I can use my phone here. I can use Epoch Cam to show what I'm trying to show here. What is going on? Yeah, I think I might be running into some limitations of this hub I've got plugged in or something like that. And this is, OBS is unhappy with me right now. But yeah, basically I bought it in a kit together, and then I added the little top and bottom cover to the MiSTer. But this is good. This is why I'm testing this. Yeah, it's a really cool device. And I think the best part about it is sort of where they're going with development. It's got a huge community behind it, the MiSTer project does. And so constantly there is new stuff coming out. So I switch back over here to my computer. The MiSTer GitHub is just absolutely constantly updating. So basically all of the main cores that are getting worked on get checked in here, which is really cool because it means I think they've done a pretty good job of sort of centralizing this open source project around a common place to talk about it and to develop. So it's very easy to get one set up. So like basically it creates a pretty coherent experience for actually using the thing, in my opinion. So there's like fantastic like update scripts that are just built into the device. So if I switch back to the MiSTer here and I'll go to, I'll exit out of here, actually reboot the thing. There's a script folder in here, and you can throw your own stuff in here. And I have a folder that will use rsync to grab ROMs from my home server and dump them onto the SD card really quickly. But there's an update script in here that will just go and grab all of the necessary files for making like the arcade boards work. It will like organize the location of those arcade cores, and it's all very, I mean, it's a little bit, you have to play with it a little bit, but I think this is, for the basics for using arcade machines and consoles, I think it's actually easier to use in a RetroPie setup. For the computer cores, they're all very individual because like the story of getting software on them is all different. So you have to read up a little bit on how those work, but it's pretty impressive. So in this, it's literally going through and making sure it's got the right BIOS files for various different consoles. It's a decent experience. I mean, it might look intimidating for folks that aren't comfortable with command line stuff at all, but you actually really don't have to get too far into that. And like Jim, this will be, I think, not too uncomfortable for you anyway, but I think it's actually simpler to use than a RetroPie setup. The MiSTer has been around, I don't know exactly. I'm like literally Googling here. Oh, this is yeah, here we go. But I want to say since like 2017, it's not been around super long, but it's been a few years now. And I think the trickiest thing for the MiSTer is getting your actual setup together. That's the hardest part. And it has been made a little bit easier now. Like if I was buying one now, I would go get the actual board, which isn't too hard to find. It's called the Thoracic DE10. They're not cheap. But I mean, in the whole scheme of things, they're not that expensive. Sometimes they're a little bit hard to actually find, but you can usually find reseller. Okay, that is insane. You don't want to spend that much money on one. Jurassic. There's good websites like MiSTer add-ons that make this stuff easier to purchase. Yeah, so they're selling it for $210. So you can get just a board. This is like one of the bundles that I got. Now I paid less than that. This stuff is getting more expensive over time. But you can get this board for $210. And then what I would do is I would go get the MiSTer multi-system. And instead of this janky setup that I have where you've got boards sandwiched together, which I mean, I kind of like, it has a certain charm to it. You can actually drop it in on top of this other PCB, and it gives it all the functionality I have plus a couple more things. It does on one PCB now. And that actually works out to be about the same price. And one of the advantages of this is it also has built-in support, depending on what case you get for it. It has built-in support for plugging a hard drive or an SSD into it, whereas I'm running everything off my SD card, but I'm starting to get to the limits of space I have on that thing. It also has nicely, it has most of the ports out the back of it, whereas my MiSTer setup, if I've got a couple controllers plugged in and a USB keyboard and mouse and Ethernet and Wi-Fi and Bluetooth dongles and all that stuff, there's ports, there's stuff coming out every single direction of the device, which doesn't make it real nice when I have it on my TV set up in the basement. It kind of doesn't matter when I have it on my desk here, but for putting into like a home entertainment thing, it's not that nice. So I would go this direction, and the price nowadays is about the same. So you can get that board for $210, and then you can get one that doesn't have, so there's a SCART connector on here, which is great for usually like European TVs if you have an old European CRT. If you get one, you can have one that just lets you pass that cable through the back. And then it will actually, that case has spots for a hard drive enclosure on the bottom of it, like this, which I personally want to do next with my MiSTer setup. I probably will wait for a while at this point, but it would be nice to have. Yeah, so I'll probably do more stuff with the MiSTer on streams here soon, but I thought it would be a good way to kind of test all these different cameras and stuff that I have set up. And I'm glad I did, because some of it didn't work very well. But hopefully the audio is okay. And yeah, so I'm going to stop this stream here, but yeah, this is fun.